You've joined the Maven Lightning lesson. We're going to talk about how CS teams can better use AI to run better customer meetings. The first thing I want people to do in the chat is I want them to indicate what is wrong with this picture. What is wrong with this picture? Does anyone want to point that out? All right. I think people got it pretty quickly. I was going to say that you shouldn't drink and read at the same time, but I think the three hands is definitely more adequate. And I think what the three hands represent, besides AI and the interesting part of it, I did not tell the prompt to put three hands. I just said insert the dog into the picture after my New Year's celebration. But what's important is that that third hand represents how AI is going to help us and make us more efficient. And just a little bit about me. So my name's Chad Hornfeld, and I've been very lucky to be in an environment where I work for a native AI company, and I've been just living and breathing AI for the past 2 years, like in a environment where that's just all we do. And just to marry that with CS has been a blessing. And I've been able to take some of those concepts and then apply them to this book that I read or that I wrote, The Strategic Customer Success Manager. So my goal for you today is that you're going to come away with very practical things that you can use right away. So many of you are leveraging AI in different ways. A lot of it is somewhat very basic. It's like, hey, summarize these meeting notes I want to send to a customer, or create this email for me. We're going to help you improve how you run your customer meetings. So this person is me. Was very stressed out, and the reason for that is, in my book, that I talk about this idea of being strategic and having this strategic mindset. So being a strategic CSM, it's not necessarily a title, it's a mindset. And the reason that I talk about this and how to have that mindset is that you want to focus on your customer and not just your product. And what I mean by that is it's not just it doesn't mean that you don't need to know your product. You need to know your products extremely well, but you have to understand your customer and have that context in order to ensure that you're marrying the right elements of what's important to them to your product. And the second part of that is that it's not just about achieving or getting a high adoption of your products. It's about achieving their business outcomes. And so that's another really, really important element of it. But the problem is that there's a lot of things that I mentioned in the book, but that can take a lot of time. And how do you accomplish this? How do you prepare for your meeting? How do you conduct a great meeting, follow up appropriately, do all these things to be that at that strategic level? And here's where I'm tearing my hair out. But the good news is that this is where AI can be your friend and can really help you in all elements of your meeting preparation and what we'll talk about. So today's session is a lightning session. It's designed to equip you with practical AI techniques that are going to transform how you prepare for, conduct, and evaluate your customer meetings. And we're going to go through three core areas and then leave some time at the end to ask questions. So the first thing we're going to talk about is this idea of the 3C framework. And it's really about preparing for your meetings, but we're going to get into a very easy way that you can use a prompt to extract the information and get you in the right mindset so that you're going to up-level your conversation. We're also going to learn a framework that you can use for prompting called Plan as part of that as we start to get into AI. Number two is we're going to talk about how you can up-level your actual conversations when you're talking to your customers by having better questions. And so we'll get into the prompt to create for that. And then lastly, things that I'd say people just don't necessarily think about or just very too busy for is how do you get adequate feedback on how that meeting went? And did you actually employ some of these techniques that we talk about in the book and using and employing that strategic mindset? And we're going to cover how you can assess yourself and then get into some questions after. All right, so the first item that we want to talk about is this idea of achieving business outcomes. And this is really the foundation, I'd say, of being a strategic customer success manager. We typically go into a meeting, and I'm sure many of you do this, is the first thing that you might want to talk about is what are some product features that you may have that the customer might be interested in. And we do this for a number of reasons. One, typically they're pretty cool features and we want to talk about them and kind of wow our customer. But a lot of times when we do this, it's almost like we're taking the easy way out. And we may lose the effectiveness of talking about these features because they may not resonate with our customers. They may not care about it. They care about what they care about. They don't necessarily care about these new cool features that your company has spent a couple months on or more to get them out there. And even if they're going to help them, if you don't understand what they need, the message may not resonate with them and you might lose them and they may not necessarily use the feature. So, this idea I said, of this strategic mindset is understanding what outcomes they're trying to achieve. And number two is understanding your customer's business context so that you can marry what is important to them to how you actually get them to leverage more aspects of your product and essentially get value. And that will lead to retention and growth. And the way to do this, the first part I would say, is having a different mindset and different approach going into your meetings. And this is what I refer to is the 3C framework. So very quickly on this, the 3C framework consists of three main areas: company, customers, and challenges. And when I say company, that's your customer. And so you want to know all about them. What's their business model? Are they a startup? Are they a global enterprise? What's their market position? Are they a leader in the space? Are they an ankle biter? And then what are some of their strategic priorities? You want to understand, how do they make money? What are some of the competitive pressures they're under? How are they driving growth? So those are the important things that you want to have a good sense of going into your meeting. You can have much better intelligent conversation with the customer. Now, the second one is customers. And when I say customers, I don't mean, your customer, the people that you work with. I mean the end customer, what's really important to them because they're the ones that are helping make money. They're, buying products or services, and that's who they care about. They don't necessarily care about you. That's part of what we're talking about today is how can we strengthen the relationship, but they really care about their customers. And so you want to know more about them, the demographics, are they real estate people? Are they IT people, salespeople? What is the value proposition, to those end users? What's important to them? What do they call them? I mean, some customers that I've worked with, they call them guests or they call them patients. I'm in the e-commerce space, so a lot of times our customers will refer to them as she. She does this and she does that. And understanding the terminology that your customers use and in using that in your conversations is really helpful and important because what all of this does is it builds trust. And trust is fundamental to having a better relationship and a better conversation with your customers. If you speak like them and they know that you understand their business, they'll be more open with you and want to have it in more, I'd say fruitful and engaging conversation. Of course, they're going to want to dive into your product and they're going to want to bring that conversation down. But this is where you need to keep that conversation at a bit of a higher level so you better understand their business and then you can be more helpful to them as the strategic partner. So the last thing is about challenges. And it's not challenges with your product, it's challenges in their business. So this could be, are they launching a new product and maybe they're focused on that? Have they just raised an additional round? Have they had to do a layoff? Maybe they're having some financial issues. And so it's really important to identify, what are those obstacles to growth and success? And so understanding those challenges is really, really important. So the key thing to keep in mind here is you have to align what their business needs are so that you can leverage your product and have a more fruitful discussion about your product once you understand the context of their business and what's important to them. All right, so let's get into the practical part and let's talk about how this translates to building out a prompt. And again, like you can use this framework. There's so many different frameworks in prompt building. I liked Plan because it was 4 letters instead of 5 letters. So you may have Grace and you have all these other ones, but instead of creating a prompt that says, I just met with this client and here is some content, write me an email, make it sound good. We can do better. We can write a better prompt that's going to be more effective. It's going to make you sound better. It's going to give you the information that you need. And you'll have to do kind of less kind of rework on it. Although it's fine to keep chatting away with, your prompt and your whatever you're using, ChatGPT or Claude, or Gem, whatever it is that you're doing. But these are some key things that can make your prompt better. So the plan framework, very simple, is you identify the purpose. What must be true when this task is done. So an example is create a pre-meeting brief that helps me identify the most strategic topics to lead for an executive conversation. The number two is you want to put limits in place. And so these are constraints or rules. And so, for example, just make this 8 to 10 questions maximum, focus the information on the last 90 days, or use these particular sources. So these are putting some rules in place. Audience context is the next one. And this is just identifying like who the players are. Is it you're a CSM, you work for, in my case, the CNAI, and let's say you've been here for X number of years. And then you want to identify the other people. My customer is from company X. This is that person's contact name. This is their title. And if you have multiple people attending your meeting, you can put those people in as well. And then the last thing is, what's the output? What's that needed output that you want? Do you want to have subheadings? However it is that you want to define that output, it's better to define that up front, and that way you're not disappointed when you see a bunch of gobbledygook that's put out. Or, just a great example is that if you want to post something in Slack, then tell it that you want to post it in Slack. Don't put tables in, because tables won't show up well in Slack. You can also just mention that you don't want this AI commentary. Sometimes your chat GPT can get snippy. And so if you don't want that, you can just specify that. So that's very simple framework that you can use. Let's get into what this looks like. And I'm just going to show you this at a high level. I'm going to get into I'm using ChatGPT for the session here. And I'm going to show you what the prompt is. I have actually a real example. And I'm going to show you what the output is. But for our purposes, just to give you a high level as to what this potentially looks like when you're putting your prompt together. So the purpose, I want to translate this 3 C's idea into reality, that I can do some research so that I can better prepare for an upcoming meeting that I have. So the purpose will be create a pre-meeting brief that helps me run a high leverage conversation with my customer as defined in the audience context, and identify the most strategic topics to lead with to achieve my objective. And a very important thing is that when you're going into a meeting, always think about what it is that you want to achieve. A lot of times we go into meetings and we just have an agenda and kind of winging it, and which is okay. That happens a fair amount of time. But my main recommendation for you is always have an idea as to what you want to achieve in that meeting. And if you have multiple people from your side, then you want to align on that. But if you have that concept in your head, like let's say, for example, you have a renewal coming up and you want to understand maybe there's like some sort of number that will influence the renewal proposal. It's like, well, I want to know what that number is. I want to confirm like, what their plans are for next year. It could be just confirming that they're going to renew. It could be identifying potential new technology that they're using. Whatever that is, there should be some idea what you're trying to achieve. Some of the limits that I want to put in place, I want to use particular sources. I want to focus on the last 90 days. I want to prioritize signal over volume. Here's kind of where you can add in some things that you might know about the client. So you can say, these are some specific things I know about the client that I want to incorporate into this brief for you to look for. You want to specify your audience. So again, it's you're at this company. And one thing I'll mention here is like, if you customize your ChatGPT or Claude and you've personalized it, some of these things you don't have to put in terms of who you are, but you do have to want to specify, who your customer is and who are the people that you're meeting. And then lastly here is the needed output. So you want to focus on these 3 headers: strategic focus and challenges, key business contact and market position, strategic recommendations for this meeting, and potential risk or concern to address. So this is how it's going to break all these things down. So let's take a look at what this looks like. And let me just share my screen here. and move to that. Okay. So, assuming everyone can see this, I'm actually taking a real customer that I've prepared for. The company is called Lofty. If you're familiar with it, Lofty lamps can actually help people wake up. They're really kind of a neat technology that's internet based. And I'm going to meet with Matt, who's the CEO. And so you can see here, create a pre-meeting brief for Matt at Lofty, identify the most strategic things I want to talk about. I put limits in. I put the context. I'm meeting with Lofty at Matt and Matt at Lofty. Um, you know, some known context, just they're an early customer of ours and they like to use new beta features. The output, similar to what I had on the slide, um, these three kind of areas, the core business profile, strategic focus and challenge the last 90 days, and just talk about who the key stakeholders are, and then give me some actionable insights. And that's it. And so then here is the output. So this is where it gets really cool. And again, like this is not any like tying into any system. This is just using ChatGPT and what we have in this MLL. So we have here's what they sell. They sell these really cool clocks and lamps. And this is important. They offer a subscription, which is really important to their business. So just so you're aware, in terms of CNAI, kind of what we do, we are a AI-powered support platform, and so we provide these really empathic responses to customers. My goal for this meeting was to talk about our new intelligence platform that's going to give them more insights into their data. But I want to understand more about what's going on in their business. So this tells me who purchased from them, 25 people aged 25 to 55. We learn a little bit more about their competitors. Hatchery Store was one of them. Some additional ones like the Aura, if you have an Aura ring, and some strategic pressures. Well, smartphones can do a lot of the things that Lofty lamps can, it seems. And so then as we kind of get into what their focuses and challenges are, one of the things that's really driving their business and from a negative perspective is that all these new tariffs that have been put in place are hampering their ability to sell in the US. And so that's really important because that could hurt them in terms of their ability to spend more money with us. But if I'm selling an intelligence product that's going to give them more insights into what their customers are interested in, then perhaps I can leverage that data to help them sell their products more intelligently. But having this information is really, really important. So I learn more about Matt, what's going on in his world. I get into these actionable insights. And what I love about this is that this prompt will give me lead lines that I can use. I can say, Matt, I know you're doubling down on Lofty Plus. What's the biggest hurdle you've seen in turning free users into stickier subscribers? So this is a great way of starting off your meeting. You up-level yourself and you're thinking more about how you can help your customer achieve their particular business goals. And the next one is around how do you actually ask the right types of questions so that you drive your conversation forward. And so this idea here is this concept of the ORS framework that I talk about in the book. And so use open questions and affirmations and reflections and summaries. But the thing that we really want to concentrate on is asking better questions. If we ask better questions, then we can have a better conversation with our customer. When we ask these strategic discovery questions, there's three main parts that we want to focus on. A lot of the times we jump down into the about your product and we ask questions like, what are some challenges you're having with our product? But again, if we take those 3C framework in place and we apply it to asking questions, we want to ask what's going on in their business and understand at the highest level what's happening. And so a question you can ask them is, let's say we were sitting around with your leadership team, what's the number one priority that they have? And keeping that at a higher level in terms of the conversation. Then once we understand maybe what's happening at their business level, we can start to ask them what's important to them. So we can ask them this whiteboard question like, well, what's one thing that needs to get off your whiteboard the next 90 days? So what's important specifically to them? And then we can maybe get down into the product itself and ask them, what's one thing that you couldn't live without in terms of our product? Or what's one thing that would make you a customer for life? So these are these ideas of strategic questions. And what you can do, and this, using some of Bob London's frameworks here, but what we can do is we can take those strategic questions and we can blend it in to what we're trying to achieve in our meeting and build a prompt around that and get us better questions that will actually, shake our customers a little bit and get to the answers that we need to help achieve our meeting outcome. And so again, we use the same plan framework. Our idea here is to get some questions to achieve our particular meeting purpose. I want about 8 to 10 questions. It's going to be inspired by Bob London's authentic discovery questions. And there's some specifics around those particular questions. Similar audience, right? We're reaching out to our customers. I'm here from Sienna on the customer side. And then the last thing here is the needed output. So now we're going to look at the prompt here. And what we can see here, very similar. We're using this plan framework. And we can see that we have a purpose, we have limits, the audience. And again, I'm going to provide this prompt for you. We've layered in the questions, so we have some input. And then what it does, this is a continued conversation from when we did the 3C, is that we can see here are the high-level business priorities. So these are some questions. It actually gives context as to why you're going to ask this particular question. So what's the single outcome? What's the single outcome the business has to prove in the next 90 days for you to feel good about where Lofty is headed? When you look at the hardware versus software subscriptions right now, which one is carrying the future and which one is paying today's bills? So again, these are very different types of questions that you might be asking today. It's about their business, but this will give you insight that you can leverage in terms of how you're going to position your product. Understanding their challenges and pains. So this is going to move things forward and make sure that you're living in Matt's world. What part of Lofty Plus feels the most fragile today if usage or sentiment shifted suddenly? If churn ticked up, and they're talking about churn in terms of losing their customers, how confident are you that you'd know why? And so this is a critical one because if I'm trying to pitch an intelligence product, if I know the answer to this, that there's a pain point there, then I can look to come in and talk about my product. One of the key problems, and I'd say the challenges that customer success people have when they're looking to talk about new products is that they always want to jump from oh, I hear a pain, and then going right into the product. But you have to explore exactly how painful a problem this is for them. And that gets them excited and it gets them to fully understand that this is a bigger problem and they do need a solution, and you potentially have that solution. So these are different questions, better questions that you've asked in the past. That is the second prompt. And again, it's something that's going to be very powerful when you use those particular questions. So the last thing that we're going to talk about, and this is the third prompt, and this gets into how do you evaluate yourself after the meeting? And what I love about this is that there is nobody here that will tell you that you're getting too much feedback. And the problem is that your manager is too busy. They're not going to necessarily give you feedback. So how do you evaluate if you're actually at that strategic level and what are the areas that you can improve on? So very simple. This is another prompt that you can use where you can take the transcript from your call that's recorded and you can upload it as part of your prompt. And you can say, I want an assessment, put these particular limits in, be concise. And what's really, really important is you want to analyze particular elements. And you can customize this however you want. I've put in the ORS framework from my book, and I put in some other indicators that I want to look for. And the output is really, really important. And this is a very abridged version, but basically you're putting a scoreboard together so you can assess yourself in various areas. And so I literally took the transcript from that call that I had and assessed myself, and this is the output. And in fact, I need to do a lot better to be more strategic on my calls. So you can see here that the score is a 3.5, so it's not where I want it to be. The trust was high. I got a 4 out of 5. and my strategic influence was high, but my open questions, my ratio from open questions to closed questions wasn't where it needed it to be. And the other thing is that when I talked about affirmations, where I would say something like, "Hey, you're doing a really great job here," I would just say something like, "That's great," where I should really explore it further. And similarly on the depth of the discovery. Um, and so again, this is a very simple thing, a very simple approach that you can use to assess your calls, and it will give you very strict feedback on how you can improve, which is something that we're all looking for. So very, very simple. This is a very quick 30-minute lightning lesson. What I'd love to do more is to explore this further on this course that I'm offering here with Maven, where it's going to get very hands-on. I'm going to share with you these prompts, and I'll give you a link to do that in a second. But if you're really interested in learning more and having a group where you can learn with other people, build out these prompts, share them, compare them, and then get deeper. We're going to build out agents. So these are repeatable agents that you can use. And then lastly, is we're going to talk about how you can leverage something like Gamma to speed up your presentation creation, which this is a Gamma presentation here as well. That will all be part of this course. And again, the idea here is how can we take these concepts and how can we help you be more effective and more efficient in your role? So for now, just as a summary, so we covered three areas. We covered the idea of the three C's and doing the proper pre-work for your calls and making sure that you're taking that call and taking that meeting at a higher level and you're doing the proper research and using AI for that. Doing authentic discovery. So taking those ideas of getting better questions based on what you want to achieve for your meeting. And the last thing is this idea of continuous improvement. So you want to assess your call, look at areas that you can improve on. And again, for me, I'm using this today. I'm using it as ways that I can improve myself. And how can I take some of the things that I've written about in the book and use AI to make that more efficient? You can use this particular code to get those resources. I'll also send them out as a follow-up if you signed up for this. If you want the prompts right now, you want to start to use them, you can go to Strategic Customer Success. There is a pop-up on the page and you can access those. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I know this is a very quick lightning lesson, a lot of things here. My biggest suggestion when it comes to AI is just keep experimenting and trying out your prompts. So those prompts that I showed you, I kept tinkering with them and adding to them and adjusting them and talking back. And that led to a stronger output. And that's what you need to do as well. And this is a journey we're all on, and I really appreciate everyone joining. And hopefully that you'll join me in the course and we can keep having this conversation. So thank you very much.